have so many jokes I could start this thing off with, but they are all inappropriate. So I can't find one worth doing. For those folks who have plugged in, we're just going to give a couple of minutes just to give everybody a chance to grab a cup of coffee and settle in. So we're going to start at around 3 after. So another minute or so, just to build the camp. All right, everybody stop texting me about my inappropriate jokes. Not gonna happen. All right, let's give it a couple more minutes. People are still filing in here. All right, I say we jump into things as long as the rest of the team is ready to roll. Thanks everybody for joining today. Really appreciate the time and energy. Have a great group of people wanting to have the conversation. Um, Let me see. We have about an hour to cover a lot of materials and answer your questions. Please use the Q&A function, and the team at RMI and Heinz will do our best to try to respond. And if we don't get to all those responses, we'll follow up with folks. We'll also send you a recording, the slides that you see, a list of the folks who've attended today, and again, any responses to those unanswered questions. My name is Rob Stephanie. I head up community economic development here at the Heinz Endowments. We spent the last 18 months or so deeply engaged with many folks on the webinar and others, try to figure out how the region can optimize its takedown of the federal incentives that were being offered at the time, primarily through the Inflation Reduction Act. More recently, we've been helping a suite of folks make sure they can draw down on funds that were committed and move projects forward. We've also partnered with the globally renowned think tank RMI, who you'll be hearing from for most of the session here, to help us think through these rapidly changing incentives and where are we, kind of state of the union address at any given time, and then long term help us understand the region's strengths to be able to respond to growing market demand in the clean tech sector. And so they're working on both of those projects for us. We have a great crew signed up for the webinar. I'm really excited, kind of spanning a urban rural spectrum across southwestern Pennsylvania, even into Ohio, West Virginia, broader Appalachia region. Have economic development practitioners, academic researchers, foundation folks, from state to municipal government officials, nonprofit community leaders, and we got Allegheny, Beaver, Westmoreland, Greene, Fayette, Lawrence, Washington counties in the house. Excited to see that. With that, let me pass it off to my colleague, Brendan Slaughterback. He is going to be heading up the Heinz Endowment's kind of next step in a lot of this work. So I wanted to make sure everybody on the call got a chance to see him and meet him. For those who don't already know him, he's been at this with us for a while. He can help us think through really the the best way to build a clean, regenerative, and broadly prosperous economy, especially given the fact that we think we have some real strengths in this clean tech sector. He's worked in philanthropy, in city and county government, resides in Pittsburgh, and he's taking a whirlwind tour of colleges with his daughters right now. So appreciate the fact that she has given him away for just a little bit to spend some time with us. With that, Brendan, let me pass it off to you.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate that, and would just echo thanks to everyone who has taken time to join today. Rob and I will include some. I have some dad jokes swirling around in my head, so we'll throw a couple of those in the follow-up materials too for people to consider. Before I get started, I'll try to be brief here. I did feel like it's worth just taking a moment to kind of recognize the intensity and kind of diversity of feelings that some folks might be entering this conversation with today, given what's going on on the national stage that we're looking at every day. Recognizing that, my suggestion is that there's really no better time for us to be building local and regional relationships and our institutions, strengthening that knowledge and our relationships are, in my opinion, going to help us respond not just to economic development challenges, but also, a whole range of other challenges and opportunities that we're really seeing on the landscape right now. So the RMI team is really driving the bus today, and they're going to give us a lot of information, including, we're really going to get a clear-eyed perspective from the team on kind of the state of play in Congress right now as it relates to opportunities for strengthening the economy of our region. I'm sure that's top of mind for a lot of folks today. But I did want to just take a moment to lift up a few other trends before we get started. In summary, to not just have your eyes on the federal government. First of all, our state, Pennsylvania, is really driving a lot of smart efforts from abandoned mine reclamation, driving solar for schools, industrial decarbonization investments through the Big Rise program that just kicked off. They're building new state-level clean energy financing infrastructure at PETA. They're helping our region secure new clean tech manufacturing anchors and supply chain companies. In addition, the proposals that are currently out there, like the governor's clean energy standard and his work and his team's work to unclog our regional electricity market, could really drive significantly more demand for clean energy in our state. And these things do not depend on the federal government. This is work we can do here locally. And we thank the administration for their leadership there. Second, our take is that regional players in southwestern Pennsylvania are collaborating in ways that I think we did not really see before the IRA and before a lot of this work kicked off. So municipalities that are sharing agendas and working together, intermediaries that are doing research and new policy work, and economic development practitioners that are really working hard on specific deals and with companies that are going to bring jobs and opportunity to our state. Third, while some of the local or national news in the US might make you think otherwise, I think it's safe to say that global and national market demand for clean energy remains incredibly strong. And our region continues to grow its capacity to respond and realize opportunities to meet this demand. And we're going to keep doing that going forward. And finally, I'd say, there really are transformative anchor companies, which we're going to hear more about, that are actively seeking southwestern Pennsylvania locations for building new operations or onshoring their operations or building out their supply chain in the region. And those are great opportunities. So this kind of convergence of all these trends, market demand, smart sort of regional work by stakeholders, and our unique strengths even amidst this uncertainty, gives us great opportunities to bring jobs and prosperity to communities in the region. So with that, I'd just say I look forward to working with everyone here, looking forward to the conversation today. And I'd love to hand things off to Aaron Brickman. Aaron is a senior principal at RMI. His work focuses on leading place-based economic development initiatives for clean tech deployment, among other things. And he and the team are going to explore many of these areas in much more detail. So with that, I'll hand it over to Aaron.
Thank you very much, Brendan. And thank you, Rob. It's good to have this opportunity here to be here with all the folks that I cannot see because of the format, but I know you're there. And I know you're a little disappointed with Rob not sharing his humor, but it sounds like he's going to hit you guys up on text, so no worries there. So wanted to make a quick introduction of RMI, myself, and then turn to my colleagues who will also be presenting on video today. So RMI, you heard a little bit about us. I think Rob said globally renowned. Thank you so much. Also, 40-year-old research advisory nonprofit. We're independent, we're nonpartisan, we're market-oriented, and our teams are dedicated to transforming energy systems while helping places secure economic opportunities. I've spent my career working with places and companies, helping leaders and economic development organizations in states, regions, and cities to secure jobs and investment in a sustainable, focused, and thriving way, and helping companies understand the best locations for their expansion. We're thrilled to be partnering with Heinz for the benefit of Southwestern Pennsylvania, and we've been able to engage substantially during the past year, hosting a boot camp for 60 stakeholders from across the region on engaging with the federal government on clean energy and clean tech, working with community-based organizations and other nonprofits to identify opportunities, helping with the RISE PA support that you heard Brendan mention just a moment ago, and bringing RMI expertise to assist wherever possible during an admittedly unusual period of time. Some of you attended our boot camp earlier in the spring in Pittsburgh that I mentioned. Much has happened since then. So for you, this will serve as a bit of an update. I believe most of you are engaging with us for the first time, and for you, this will be an abridged overview and update, all rolled into one, thus the micro boot camp that was on the screen earlier. So thanks again for being here, and let me pass it over to Julia to introduce herself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Julia Meisel. I'm a manager at RMI focused on clean regional economic development, and I'm leading our clean tech cluster analysis in Southwestern Pennsylvania, which I'll share a little bit more about later this morning. Elisa?
Hi, I'm Elisa Peterson. I'm a federal policy manager at RMI, where I've been following the Inflation Reduction Act kind of from start till right now. So happy to be here and chat with you all.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Elisa. And Elisa, I'm glad you didn't say start to finish. The future is quick bit of housekeeping. As you heard from Rob earlier, the meeting is being recorded, and that recording and slides will be shared after. Please post your questions using the Q&A function that hopefully you can see here in the Teams webinar platform. We'll try to answer clarifying questions as we go, and we'll answer more in-depth questions live at the end. So without further ado, over to you, Elisa.
Thanks, Aaron. All right, so we will start off with just kind of a high-level overview of IRA. Then we'll dive deeper into kind of how IRA has impacted Pennsylvania so far. We'll deep dive into two of the tax credits that have been particularly useful. And we will talk through kind of like the current state of play for the Inflation Reduction Act, given what's going on in Congress right now and at the administration. So the Inflation Reduction Act, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and the CHIPS and Science Act combined is the largest clean tech deployment and manufacturing investment the US has ever made. You can see kind of that chart on the left. Anything in light blue is unprecedented investment. So this really set up the US to start deploying clean tech investment in a way that we have not seen previously. If you look at that chart on the right, you can see that compared to even other countries that you might think of as leaders in the clean tech space, this investment puts us at a larger investment compared to any other country in the world. So just to kind of do a high-level overview of what's included in the Inflation Reduction Act, which will be kind of the primary focus today. It actually covers all sectors of energy. So for buildings, there are tax credits for residential upgrades as well as for commercial upgrades. There's also new rebate programs. We won't really cover that in much detail today. For transportation, there are electric vehicle tax credits as well as rebates and grants for electric vehicle charging. Again, we won't cover that in too much depth. Electricity is a big deal within the Inflation Reduction Act. There are updates to the tax credit for renewables that make it far more generous. Industry saw a lot of new development in the Inflation Reduction Act around hydrogen, carbon capture, sustainable aviation fuel, as well as clean tech manufacturing. And then there were also just system level changes within the Inflation Reduction Act in terms of how we can monetize tax credits, as well as how we can finance these new types of projects. And with that, we've seen kind of this growth in clean energy. So as Brendan mentioned initially, globally, we're seeing clean energy deployment just skyrocket over the last few years. And with the IRA investment, the US is the world's second largest clean energy market. So there's a large market outside of the US, but the US is starting to deploy at a scale that we had not seen previously. And this could mean a large economic development opportunity for the state of Pennsylvania. We looked at kind of what this means in terms of solar deployment, wind deployment, batteries, and our analysis shows that Pennsylvania, if they kind of deployed to the degree that would be needed to be to kind of be climate aligned, that would be about $26 billion worth of federal investment from the Inflation Reduction Act. Now we're starting to see that investment already start to happen. These are screenshots from this really great resource called Energy Momentum Near You. If you type that into Google, you should be able to find it. And it shows how what the investments have looked like in Pennsylvania to date. You can see that on the right, I just took a screenshot of some of the investments. It actually lists each investment as well as which tax credit is associated with that investment, and then where it's at in the construction process. So whether it's already operating or if it's just announced or under construction. So there has been $4.9 billion announced in Pennsylvania, but $3.3 billion of that is still outstanding. So that means that depending on what happens with kind of the federal environment, that $3.3 billion might be what I would consider kind of at risk. And most of this investment has been around 45X, which is the clean tech manufacturing tax credit, and 48E, 45Y, which is the clean electricity deployment tax credit. And so because of that, those are the two tax credits that we will kind of deep dive on later in the presentation. But obviously, we are kind of at this moment of fluctuation where the federal landscape is rapidly changing. I'm putting a disclaimer here that, you know, it's changing every day. This is as of today. I think even tomorrow there might be an update at the Senate. So this is my greatest understanding as of right now. So the House passed a reconciliation bill a couple weeks ago that updated some of these tax credits within the Inflation Reduction Act. Some things are good about these updates. For instance, sustainable aviation fuel tax credit was actually extended to a later deadline. They didn't touch things like direct pay, and in general, most of the IRA grant programs have been largely obligated, and they didn't try to go after already obligated funding. So that was all good. But mostly it was a lot of bad within the House reconciliation bill in terms of kind of concerns about these tax credits potentially moving forward. So it terminated the hydrogen production tax credit by the end of the year. It terminated consumer tax credits, including electric vehicles, energy efficiency, and solar by the end of the year. It makes some pretty dramatic changes to the Cleantech manufacturing tax credit that doesn't terminate it, but makes it extremely difficult to comply. And then kind of at the last minute, it also updated the clean electricity tax credit to phase it out much quicker than it previously was intended to be. And then for a lot of the IRA programs, it rescinds any of the unobligated balance and terminates and closes the program, meaning that it's not going to be easy to add new additional funding to those programs without kind of recreating the programs. And so let's start there with kind of the unobligated grant funding. What does that actually mean? The good news is that most of the grant funding within the Inflation Reduction Act was obligated at the time of the bill passing. What was interesting is each time a bill kind of goes through Congress, it gets scored. And so, if you're saying let's repeal or let's rescind any unobligated balance within the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, that's an opportunity for us to understand how much funding actually is unobligated. So I took kind of that unobligated funding compared to the original obligation and compared it in this chart. So you can see for pretty much most of the large pots of funding, the majority of it has been obligated. That's the light blue, dark blue is the unobligated. What's a little complicated here is what's happening at the same time as Congress doing this reconciliation package. The administration is going through to some of the grant programs and terminating contracts. So we're seeing them try to do this for the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. They started to do this a couple weeks ago with some of the advanced industrial demonstration projects. So while this chart kind of looks like a lot of the money is out the door, there is some concern that the administration might terminate some of these programs. But what I want to maybe highlight is some of the programs that it does not seem like they're going after that Pennsylvania has benefited from. The first is the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant. That's what supports RISE PA. That seems to be safe. Solar for All, that seems to be safe. That's part of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. The Home Energy Rebate Program, that seems to be safe. So those are some of the largest pots of funding that have benefited Pennsylvania, appear to be kind of unaffected. So where we're really focusing our attention for the reconciliation package is not on the grant programs, but is actually on the tax credits. because that's where we view there being this large opportunity. As I showed you previously, a lot of the deployment in Pennsylvania has been supported by these tax credits. And so that's kind of like the area of focus. We believe that just a portion of that tax credit funding has been spent, and there's a huge opportunity for much more deployment using these tax credits. This was an analysis that we did that kind of looked at the Congressional Budget Office always estimates how much they think the tax credits are going to be used. And then we did an estimate of like, what if it was used to the degree that, like kind of to the largest extent possible. And that's where we got that $28.6 billion worth of potential federal investment within Pennsylvania. If you look at Pennsylvania, kind of the breakdown of grant funding versus tax credit funding, 80% of funding would be tax credit funding. So that's why like the tax credits are kind of the big opportunity that we see kind of moving forward. So I mentioned the House has passed the reconciliation package, but that doesn't mean that that package is law. It still needs to pass through the Senate. And so where we're at right now is the House has passed it. Now they're waiting on the Senate. The Senate committees are each kind of deciding whether they want to take the package that the House put together and just move that forward, or whether they want to update that package and kind of make their own tweaks to it. From what we have seen, a lot of senators have publicly said that they are not super happy with the House package for various reasons, but particularly the energy pieces have been mentioned by a few senators. And so we have reason to believe that some of the updates from the House package will get updated in the Senate. And so then, in theory, what would happen is the Senate would pass their own package. They're targeting passage in July. By July 4th was their goal. And then, you know, the House has passed a reconciliation package, the Senate has passed a reconciliation package, but they're not the same package. So then they would need to kind of get negotiated in the House and the Senate. Each of them have slim majorities. And the goal is to whatever is going to pass, they would like to pass it by August recess. So that means, you know, early August would be when we'd kind of know what's going to happen to the tax credits. I think that is an ambitious goal, although I also was surprised at how quickly the House was able to pass it, given their slim majority. And so potentially it could happen in August. The real like concrete deadline is the end of the year, because that's when the Trump tax cuts go away. And so that's kind of like when they want to, like when they absolutely need to pass the credit. So my assumption is that something will happen by the end of the year, August being as early as possible. But I want to just emphasize the point that what I shared in the House version is not the final version. I think that's probably the worst case scenario. The Senate seems to be a little bit more favorable for the energy tax credits. And so there is still opportunity to kind of like influence this decision, educate policymakers about how these tax credits benefit certain projects, and you know, design around that. So to deep dive into just a couple tax credits, I'll start off with one of the like larger mechanisms that happen within the Inflation Reduction Act, which is direct pay. So for a lot of the tax credits within the Inflation Reduction Act, they made them eligible for direct pay, meaning that if you are a non-taxable entity like a school or a nonprofit business, or maybe a green bank, you can actually take advantage of a tax credit where you previously couldn't. Previously, let's say you're a school and you were going to take advantage of the tax credit, you would need to enter into some type of deal with a private company that has tax liability. Oftentimes that'd be the solar developer. and then they would pass through a portion of that tax credit through to you, but you wouldn't see kind of the full value. With direct pay, it's much more streamlined. Essentially, you file taxes as if you were a taxable entity. There's a certain form for direct pay, and you just get a refund that is the size of the tax credit. This is what I mentioned was not impacted by reconciliation. There was no updates to this monetization strategy. The other kind of thing that happened with the Inflation Reduction Act was the updates to the renewable electricity tax credit. I do want to emphasize that the electricity tax credit was not new with the Inflation Reduction Act. That tax credit has been around since, I believe, 2005, but there were updates to the tax credits to make it more generous. So the first update was if you wanted to take advantage of that 30% investment tax credit, which has been around, since 2005, you have to meet prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements. So this was trying to kind of design for good paying jobs within the solar, wind, battery industry. Then there was a bonus adder that if you sourced your products domestically, you could get a 10% additional bonus. So instead of 30% off your upfront project cost, you get 40% off your upfront project cost. The next bonus was energy communities. This was based on kind of where your project was located. My recollection is Pennsylvania has a lot of energy communities. So if you're sited in an energy community, you automatically get that additional 10% bonus. And then the final one was a low income bonus. This was either your project was located in a low income community or it benefited low income communities. Depending on kind of the way that the project was structured, you could either get a 10% or a 20% bonus. And so what this looks like is if you had a well thought out project, you could actually get up to a 70% investment tax credit. So essentially 70% off your upfront project cost. So this was a really big deal for renewable deployment, just to make it far more generous. And then adding on kind of the direct pay on top of it, you're creating new players that can take advantage of these tax credits and a far more generous tax credit. So this is the update that happened in the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, this is the update to that update that happened in the last House reconciliation bill. The biggest change is that it adds a new phase down. So essentially what this does is if there's projects that start construction 60 days after the bill becomes law, they no longer can take advantage of this tax credit. So let's say we're talking about the August recess timeline. That means if you're starting a project in 2026, that's, a renewable project or a battery project, this tax credit would no longer be available to you. That's the big update from this reconciliation package. That update happened kind of at the very last minute. Previously, the phase out was a little bit more generous than that. And then nuclear is the only exception to that. So if you have a nuclear project, it does not, it just needs to be placed in service, or it just needs to start construction by 2028. They also added in foreign entity of concern provisions. These don't matter that much because of the phase down. Previously, the foreign entity of concern provisions were a big deal. It repeals transferability, which is the other kind of mechanism that was created. But again, because of the phase down, the transferability repeal doesn't matter that much. And the other modification of the low-income community bonus credit, again, doesn't that matter that much if this phase down happens 2 months after the bill becomes law. So this would essentially make new renewable projects not be able to take advantage of this tax credit. When we looked at the Pennsylvania map of like planned projects, a lot of those planned projects were the renewable projects that would take advantage of this. There's real implications for whether those projects would move forward, given that they might be losing 30 to 70% of the incentives that they were relying on. And then there has been independent analysis showing that because of this, it'll slow down renewable deployment. Renewables are the cheapest form of electricity, and so it could raise the electricity cost for both residential and commercial industrial customers. So this is a big deal, but again, it's not final. This is the House version as it stands right now. Even members of the House have gone to the Senate and said, hey, we're not super happy with where this landed. Like, maybe like soften this a little bit. I think there's a hope that this will get softened, but it is like a very good idea if you have projects that you're involved in that are taking advantage of this tax credit that maybe are at the plan phase but not operational phase. Share details about those projects, share kind of jobs associated with those projects with your member of Congress. The next tax credit that we'll cover is around clean tech manufacturing. IRA was really interesting in that they wanted to increase deployment of clean tech, but they also wanted to make sure that whatever that clean tech that was being deployed actually benefited American workers as well, and it was potentially manufactured in the US. So they increased the demand for domestic content through different tax credits, like the EV tax credit. It had a domestic content kind of requirement. As I mentioned in the renewable tax credit I just covered, there was a domestic content adder. And then it also included a new tax credit called 45X, which helps spur clean tech manufacturing in the US. This really did have a dramatic effect. This is just since IRA passed. These are all the clean tech projects that have popped up across the US. We're seeing 5 times as much clean tech manufacturing since IRA passed compared to like a previous 2 years before IRA passed. The bulk of that investment has been in the battery space, but also some in solar as well as electric vehicles. So that kind of makes sense that we're seeing a lot in battery and solar because 45X, which is the manufacturing production tax credit, is really focused on 5 different clean tech manufacturing components: solar, wind, inverter, battery, and critical minerals. The way that this is designed is that it goes into effect in 2023, it starts phasing down in 2029, and then it fully goes away in 2032. This has driven quite a bit of investment. There's no cap on this credit, so the more you produce of these components, the more tax credit is available to you. And I mentioned direct pay earlier. This tax credit is interesting because you can actually take advantage of it using direct pay. A few things to just highlight here is, given the way that this tax credit ramps down, the earlier these projects are deployed, the more benefit they have. The tax credit was designed to kind of be able to compete more with China. The idea was to look at how much more it costs to produce the same product in the US compared to China and try to like kind of close that gap. So that was how the IRA created 45X. The House reconciliation package has made some updates to 45X. The most important update to pay attention to is the foreign entity of concern update. So this update applies to both the taxpayer as well as the material. So foreign entity of concern, the one that is probably the most important is China is considered a foreign entity of concern. And they have a lot of, they kind of control a lot of the supply chains within these components. So like, for instance, if you're doing solar manufacturing, maybe your panel is manufactured in the US and therefore you qualify for 45X, but your wafer is likely coming from China because they have 98% of the market. And so the concern here, and this is a really big concern, is that this update will not just impact kind of planned investment, it will also impact existing investment for 45X. So if you're a current manufacturer that's taking advantage of 45X, and you are sourcing your products from China, in a couple years, that tax credit will no longer be available to you. This is a really big deal. A lot of members of Congress are pushing back on the FIAC being too strict. And there are new proposals kind of swirling around about how to like maintain this foreign entity of concern, not trying to give American taxpayer money to China, but still making sure that we're not totally kind of disrupting existing domestic manufacturing within the US. And then I'll just end with this. I talked a lot about the uncertainty within the federal government. That uncertainty is real. It should be like we should have clarity in the next 6 months at the very latest, maybe even sooner than that. But there is stuff that economic developers can do now to still support clean tech deployment and manufacturing within their regions. The first is to enlarge the domestic market. IRA sort of did that. So if IRA were to go away, like the tax credits that request domestic demand, that could be spurred at the state level, whether that's through kind of like state policies around clean energy standards, or whether that's working with companies within your region to put that into RFPs that you want domestically sourced. You can also kind of help with compressing lead times for projects. Permitting is like one of the things that I think slows down ramping up new projects in the US. So like as much as we can support with like local permitting, speeding that up, or identifying sites that are already ready for electricity, that could be helpful. Looking at the workforce, like depending on what you're trying to do, what type of workforce do you need to create? Who's missing? How do you make your region attractive to that workforce? And then thinking through supply chain integration. Where do you source the supply chains, especially given the kind of the FIAC potential provisions? Like trying to spur those supply chains is also something that state economic developers can do. So with that, I will pass it back to Aaron to do some Q&A.
Great. Thanks very much, Elisa. So we've gotten a few questions already, and I think I addressed a couple of them. So there was first, to clarify, they aren't going after specific funding, but the overall programs. And I made the point in the chat that the House has targeted specific funding or programmatic elements within the IRA. And then you made the point about the Senate. Janine mentioned, made a comment that everyone should look in the chat about a rally today that she referenced. Then two questions about FIAC. One, what are you hearing about the FIAC or foreign entity of concern provisions? It is impossible to avoid Chinese components in the generating equipment or storage that we procure. And then I'll just add a second one to that, and you can just tell us if you think you've covered it comprehensively. But echoing the question about FIAC and why you don't see it as an issue now, by chance, did you listen to the May 22nd episode of the Energy Gang podcast? They made a pretty strong case that FIAC are problematic right now too, but maybe that's now old hat. And then I'll have one more after that for Rob and Brendan.
Yeah, so I think that this has been confusing. I want to differentiate between FIAC for the tech neutral tax credits, so like electricity generation, and the clean tech manufacturing tax credit. So because of clean tech, so let's start with the deployment of renewable energy tax credits. Because of the phase out in 2 months after the bill becomes law, that is the limiting factor right now. If they were to change the phase out to a later date, then I would be much more concerned about the FEOC. But as the bill stands right now, the FEOC doesn't really matter because it takes effect after the phase out would already have happened. So the way the bill's written now, the FEOC really only applies to nuclear projects because no other project is going to be able to take advantage of the tax credit unless the phase out date is delayed. For clean tech manufacturing, the FEOC is the most important issue. I care about that a lot. That right now I've heard it's pretty unworkable as written. I don't know if that fully addresses all the questions, but I want to like really make that distinction.
Folks can let us know in the chat. That's a lot of FEOC, but also you can contact Elisa after. There's one in here for Robin team. 90% of all of the projects in the PJM queue are renewable energy. Have we made the argument to McCormick and Fetterman that killing renewable energy flies in the face of energy dominance? Rob, I see you've weighed in the chat. Please unmute and let me know if you'd like to say more now.
It's the issue of the day. There's a whole host of folks looking at that. Jim, we know that you guys are, Exis is trying to deploy even more. And we know that the more diversified our grid can be, the more affordable it's going to be for folks. So really nervous about kind of what we're seeing right now as it relates to that queue and bringing it online. Sorry. I can't tell you I'm going to do anything about it just yet, but I'm nervous about it. It is the issue. Brendan, do you have anything you want to add on this one?
Well, I'd say, I don't think we're sort of crossing any C3 or policy lines here and talking about PJM practices. I'd say just reinforcing the importance that any company or entity that has a project in the works that thinks that this is an issue should certainly be reaching out to congressional offices or the governor's office to talk about that. We're heartened by the governor's strong action on this already and thinking about how to put more pressure on PJM to address these queue issues. But I guess I would just agree and say we hear a lot of talk about permitting reform, and this is not actually a permit exactly. But it's increasingly like one of the major impediments to deploying these resources in our region. And if we want more clean energy and more affordable energy, we've got to address this.
And I will say that I think that there are folks that are making this argument. Specifically, I've seen SEIA do that, the Solar Energy Industry Association. I think that that's useful. I think also it'd be useful to hear that from like actual project owners, and just given McCormick would be the better one to reach out to, just because the reconciliation process, the way that it works, you only need to engage Republicans, so Democrats don't really matter, unfortunately.
All right. Oops. Following up on FEOC, on the first point you made, Elisa, is it a matter of timing for FEOC to come into play or eligibility overall, or is that the same intertwined question?
for the first point, it's a matter of timing. So for renewable deployment, let's say the bill passes when they want it to pass, August. The way that it's written is for if let's say you're a solar project, August, September, October. If you're a solar project that's coming online in November, that you're starting construction in November, you cannot take advantage of the tax credit anymore because it's 2 months after the date of enactment. The FIAC provisions come online January 1st, 2026. So the phase out happens before the FIAC provisions. If the phase out was delayed, then the FIAC would be the bigger issue. So like both are issues. This one is the phase out is just the more pressing issue because it happens before FIAC takes effect.
All right, please continue to submit questions into the Q&A part here. Elisa, don't go anywhere yet, but in the meantime, I'm going to pass to Julia, who introduced herself earlier, to talk a bit about what's next.
Thanks, Aaron. So clearly it's a very uncertain time, but that doesn't mean investment everywhere is just grinding to a halt. There's still investment, there's still economic development opportunities. So we think it's important to, be clear about, yes, what's at risk, but also what has already happened and what is still possible. And Southwestern Pennsylvania does have attributes and assets that can support economic development, including for clean tech. So to understand what some of these opportunities are in the region, RMI, with support from Hines, has been working to identify which clean tech sectors the region could support and grow and use as the driver of regional economic development. So Aaron mentioned previously some of the work that we've been doing in the region, engaging with and learning from local stakeholders, like the boot camp in March, where we had over 60 folks from across the region, some RISE PA engagement. And then in this separate analysis project, we had an additional over 20 interviews with regional organizations, as well as doing our own economic, workforce, and policy analysis to identify priority clean tech sectors as opportunities for clean tech cluster development, and to develop recommendations for how the region could capture that opportunity. And we will be presenting those sectors and recommendations next month. And I'll hand it back to you, Aaron.
Great. Thank you, Julia. All right, I think we can minimize the slide or stop sharing slides. Thanks to everyone for spending this time with us. We certainly appreciate the time and attention and the questions. Thanks very much to the Hines Endowment for hosting and getting the word out. Thank you again directly, Rob and Brendan. Your work really is a real advocate for the region's future. Obviously, as you heard, and as many of you know too well, this is quite a dynamic time, and we don't expect that to change for a while, at least not at the federal level. Please let me know if you have questions that you didn't get to pose during today's session. My email is abrickman@rmi.org, or you can feel free to reach out to Elisa directly, apeterson@rmi.org, or Julia J. Meisel at rmi.org. We'd be more than happy to engage. More to come, including at next month's convening, and we look forward to remaining in close partnership with Hines and economic and community stakeholders of Southwestern Pennsylvania as we seek to navigate these most unusual times together in pursuit of economic opportunity in clean tech. So with that and the thank yous, just again, appreciation for all of you for being here, and Ruth and Noor and Mark behind the scenes, not on video, but without whom this would not have come to any of you. And have a great rest of your day.